A command hub, not a warship, is reportedly at the center of the latest strike inside Russian-held Crimea. According to Ukrainian and open-source reporting, drones targeted the Black Sea Fleet's command and control facility in Sevastopol, along with reported hits on drone bases and military positions elsewhere on Russian-held or Russian territory. Not a tanker, not a patrol boat, a headquarters. If the reporting holds up, that distinction matters more than it looks at first glance. Here's the question this video is built around. Why aim at a building instead of a fleet? And what does that tell us about how this war at sea is actually being fought right now? We'll lay out what's confirmed, what's still just reported, and what a command hub even does that makes it worth the risk of hitting. Stick with the facts here, because the gap between reported and confirmed is where the real picture lives. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT 030100 resolution Ts. The real question the video answers. Start with geography, because it explains almost everything else. Sevastopol sits on the southwestern tip of Crimea, wrapped around one of the deepest natural harbors on the Black Sea. Russia has based its Black Sea Fleet there for more than 2 centuries, and since the 2014 annexation of Crimea, it has been the fleet's primary home port, its logistics hub, and the seat of its command structure. A command hub here isn't one building with a flag on it. It's a network. Communications, infrastructure, staff officers coordinating ship movements, missile targeting data, and the administrative backbone that turns a collection of vessels into a functioning fleet. Take that away, even temporarily, and you haven't sunk a ship. You've degraded the ability to use every ship at once. Reports on this strike describe the target specifically as command and control infrastructure, not an individual vessel. That's a real shift in emphasis. For much of the past 2 years, Ukraine's maritime drone campaign focused heavily on so-called shadow fleet tankers. The aging, often unregistered oil tankers Russia has used to move sanctioned crude around Western price caps, plus direct hits on individual warships and the Kerch Bridge corridor. A strike aimed at command infrastructure instead of a ship, if the reporting is accurate, moves up the target hierarchy. It's the difference between hitting a delivery truck and hitting the dispatch office that routes all of them. We went through the open-source tracking accounts and satellite imagery trackers that usually surface within hours of an event like this, and one thing kept standing out. How much of the public picture, in the first day or two, rests entirely on unverified claims from both sides. That's not unusual. It's the normal state of affairs for this kind of story, and it's worth sitting with before we go further. Here's the obstacle that shapes almost every report like this one: the fog of the first 24 to 48 hours. Ukrainian officials have reason to describe strikes as successful. Russian officials have reason to downplay or deny damage entirely. Independent confirmation usually comes later, if it comes at all, through satellite imagery from commercial providers, geolocated video, or admissions buried in unrelated statements. Analysts who track this conflict closely have learned, often the hard way, to treat same-day claims about damage or casualties as provisional. So when we say reportedly struck, that word is doing real work. It isn't hedging for its own sake, it's just the honest state of the evidence right now. What we can say with more confidence is the pattern this fits into. Sevastopol has been hit before, and not lightly. In April 2022, the missile cruiser Moskva, the fleet's flagship, sank after what Ukraine said was a missile strike and Russia attributed to an onboard fire, a disagreement that never fully resolved. In September 2023, a missile strike on the Black Sea Fleet headquarters building in Sevastopol was confirmed through satellite imagery and video showing visible structural damage. An earlier hit on the same kind of command target this new strike reportedly hit again. That same month, the submarine Rostov-on-Don and a landing ship in a Sevastopol dry dock were damaged in a widely documented strike. By late 2023 and into 2024, a meaningful portion of the fleet's larger surface combatants had relocated eastward to Novorossiysk on Russia's mainland Black Sea coast. A move naval analysts read as an acknowledgement that Sevastopol had become too exposed to hold the fleet's most valuable assets. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT. Microfinal. HQ strike closed a chapter. This reopens the question. That relocation looked, for a while, like it had settled the question of Sevastopol's vulnerability. The big ships moved. The immediate threat seemed managed, but a strike on the command hub itself, the thing that doesn't relocate as easily as a cruiser, suggests that chapter isn't actually closed. It just moved to a different kind of target. So why go after a headquarters at all? Worth explaining, in plain terms, what network-centric naval warfare actually means, because it's not just jargon, it's the whole logic behind this kind of target selection. A modern fleet doesn't fight as a collection of independent ships making their own calls. It fights as a network. Sensors feeding data to a command center issuing orders, ships executing those orders in coordination. Air defense works far better when the radar picture from multiple platforms gets fused into one coherent picture at a central node, rather than each ship watching its own narrow slice of sky. Disable that node, and every connected ship becomes, for a time, less capable. Not because it's been touched, but because it's been cut off from the system that made it effective. One successful strike on the right building can, in theory, hurt an entire fleet's combat power more than sinking any single vessel would. There's a line that shows up again and again in naval doctrine writing, going back decades. Control the flow of information and you control the fight, regardless of who has more hulls in the water. That's not a new idea. What's relatively new is a state with a limited air force and no blue water navy of its own acting on that idea using drones and long-range munitions instead of a battle fleet. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT, personal phrase. Here's what stuck with us. Here's the detail that stuck with us while researching this. The Ukrainian drone boats most associated with this campaign. Platforms like the Magura V5 and the Sea Baby, both widely documented in open-source military reporting since 2023, were never built to fight a symmetric naval battle. They're small, cheap relative to what they've targeted, and expendable in a way a warship never is. That asymmetry is the whole point. A fleet built around large, expensive, hard-to-replace platforms is structurally vulnerable to an opponent willing to trade large numbers of cheap, disposable ones, especially when the cheap ones go after high-value, low-mobility targets like a headquarters building instead of trying to outfight a warship directly. Most people assume naval power is still mainly about who has the bigger ships. This war has been quietly rewriting that assumption for 3 years. A state with essentially no traditional navy has pushed a larger, better-resourced fleet out of its own historic home port, using long-range strikes, uncrewed surface vessels, and, per this latest reporting, strikes on the command apparatus itself rather than the ships it commands. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT, obstacle. Russian denial pattern complicates assessment. There's a recurring obstacle analysts run into with every one of these strikes, worth naming directly. Official Russian statements have, in prior incidents, ranged from silence to partial acknowledgement to outright denial that later proved incomplete. The Moskva fire explanation is the clearest example. That track record doesn't tell us what happened this time. It does explain why serious open-source analysts wait for satellite imagery, geolocated footage, or independent confirmation before treating a damage claim as settled, no matter which side is making it. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT, micro-final. The strike itself is one data point in a longer campaign. Zoom out, though, and this single strike stops looking like an isolated event and starts looking like one data point in a much longer campaign. Since 2022, Ukraine has run a sustained series of long-range strikes reaching deep into Crimea and, at times, into Russian territory itself, hitting the Kerch Bridge road and rail link in October 2022 and again in July 2023, striking airbases like Engels far from the front line and targeting oil refining and fuel infrastructure well behind Russian lines. The thread running through all of it is a strategy of degrading Russia's ability to sustain and project military power from the rear, not just contesting territory at the front. A strike on a fleet command hub fits that pattern precisely. It's an attack on capacity and coordination, not a hardened target hit for its own sake. Now, here's a take that'll probably split opinion, and we'd rather say it plainly than dance around it. Targeting command and control infrastructure over individual ships is, functionally, a more effective use of a limited drone and missile arsenal. But it's also a heavier bet, because command facilities tend to be better defended, and the payoff depends entirely on whether the damage is real and lasting. If this strike turns out to be more symbolic than substantive, The shift in targeting priority still says something about intent that outlasts the immediate physical outcome. We think that intent, aiming at the network instead of the node, is the bigger story here, whatever the damage assessment eventually shows. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT, 50% mark, mid-roll repose of the central question. So let's repose the question we opened with, now that we're far enough in to actually answer it with some nuance. Why hit a headquarters instead of a ship? Because in a network-centric fleet, the headquarters is the ship that matters most. The one no missile fires without, the one no coordinated defense happens without. Sink one vessel and the fleet loses one vessel. Disable the node connecting all of them, even briefly, and the fleet loses coordination across the board. That's the calculation, as best as open source analysis can reconstruct it, behind moving up the target hierarchy from tankers and individual ships to command infrastructure itself. What do you think? Does targeting command and control facilities mark an escalation in this campaign? Or is it simply the next logical step in a strategy that's been building since the Moskva sank back in 2022? We're genuinely curious where people land, because the analysts we follow don't agree with each other on it either. Where does this actually stand right now? As of this reporting, the extent of damage to the command hub hasn't been independently confirmed through satellite imagery or verified video. The kind of confirmation that, in prior Sevastopol strikes, has typically taken anywhere from a day to over a week to surface. What's more consistently reported is the shift in emphasis. Command and control as a stated target category, described separately from the Shadow Fleet tanker campaign that dominated headlines through 2024 and into 2025. Reports of additional hits on drone bases and military posts elsewhere on Russian-held or Russian territory tied to the same reported wave of activity likewise remain in the reported, not yet independently verified category as of this recording. RETENTIONCHECKPOINT. Personal phrase. Myth-busting assumption about naval power. There's a detail in the geolocation trackers we couldn't independently verify before finishing this script. The precise scale of structural damage to the facility, which conflicting accounts describe very differently depending on the source. We didn't want to guess at a number just to make this feel more settled than it is. If you've seen updated satellite imagery or a credible geolocation thread on this specific strike, drop it in the comments. We'll be watching, and it may shape a follow-up. Stepping back, this is less about one building in Crimea and more about where naval warfare is heading generally. A fleet's most valuable asset increasingly isn't its largest ship. It's the invisible layer of command, sensors, and coordination that makes the whole fleet function as one system. States without a traditional navy are learning they don't need one to impose real costs on states that have one, as long as they can reach the nodes holding the network together. Whether that lesson holds beyond this specific war is a genuinely open question, and one worth watching over the next few years, well beyond this single incident. For now, what's confirmed is limited, what's reported is significant, and the gap between the two is exactly where we'll be watching for updates. If you want the fuller picture of how this campaign got here, from the Moskva to the Kerch Bridge to the fleet's retreat toward Novorossiysk, that's a longer story we've been tracking piece by piece, and it's worth knowing before the next headline like this one lands.